Good morning. Welcome to Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. My name is Jack Doggett, and I'm very pleased to be the worship leader for today's lay service. Each week, we gather in community to refocus on the things which are most important in our lives, remembering who we are and what we are for. It is a serious task, done joyfully, playfully, and intentionally. It is time for spiritual practice, for our essential work as human beings, a time to return to the wells from which we draw meaning and sustenance. This morning, we're going to hear from Cody and Cait and Joe about times in their lives where they didn't know what was coming and how that time offered growth and insight. As we sit on this last day of the year, let's consider not rushing to reset our intentions and make hasty resolutions. Can I hear an amen? Reverend David will provide an opportunity in next week's service, which is a bookend to this one, to go through that process in a meaningful ritual as a congregation. So let's just, during this next week, consider being curious, and listening to our hearts, and taking some extra time to ease into this 2024, which to me looks like a very challenging year. I'd like to welcome to those joining us online. We're delighted that you're here. This congregation is all of us together in person and online. And if you're a new online visitor, you'll find a link to our visitor form in the video, and we'd love to connect with you. Announcements, there's a community potluck next Friday night, which is a monthly thing that we do. So if you would like some community and some different food, please look at the newsletter for a time and join in. I don't know what the activity is, but there's always some fun activity to go along with the dinner. As we enter into worship space, I'll offer today a reading from Oreck Hewitt called First Comes the Waiting. This is the season of endings and beginnings, when the small signs of dawn pierce through the night and something new is born. But first comes the waiting. First comes the lessons of endings and beginnings, the presence of life, the sheltering spirit of love, grieves with those sweeping up the debris of loss, waits with those who restlessly reach out for change. Grant us courage in the night to guard each other's dreams for this holy, wondrous universe. Grant us, O universe, unfolding in mystery, a sense of your timing. May we loosen our grip on that which doesn't serve us, leaving behind that which we have outgrown or outworn. Teach us the lessons of beginnings. Remind us that such waitings and endings may be a starting place, a planting of seeds which bring to birth what is already to be born. Something right and just and different. A new song, a deeper relationship, a fuller love in the fullness of time. So if you'd like to stand as you're willing and able and sing our opening hymn, There's a River Flowing in My Soul. Flowing in my
Good morning. I have a story for you. I'm going to assume you have some familiarity with it. It's the story of Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge from Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. He starts out mean and miserly and undergoes a transformation when he encounters three specters, the ghosts of Christmases past, present, and yet to come. The ghost of the past takes him back to his youth, before he became so preoccupied by hoarding riches. Scrooge sees his old employer and notices how that man's generosity and caring were gifts that had value quite apart from money. He sees the moment when his singular focus on wealth drove away the woman he loved. By the time Scrooge meets the ghost of Christmas present, his transformation has already begun. "Spirit," said Scrooge submissively, "conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learnt a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it." In the present, he gets to see his underpaid clerk, Bob Cratchit, celebrating joyously with his loving family, regardless of their poverty. Bob's afflicted son, Tiny Tim, catches at Scrooge's softening heart with his bravery and selfless good cheer. Scrooge wishes that Tiny Tim will be spared from death. The ghost of Christmas present then brings Scrooge to his nephew's family, where they happen to be talking about their miserly uncle. "He's a comical old fellow," said Scrooge's nephew. "That's the truth, and not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offenses carry their own punishment, and I have nothing to say against him. The consequence of his taking a dislike to us and not making merry with us is, as I think, that he loses some pleasant moments, which could do him no harm. I am sure he loses pleasanter companions than he can find in his own thoughts, either in his moldy office or his dusty chambers. I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not, for I pity him." By the time Scrooge meets the final specter, he has revisited his choices in the past and seen his present self from new perspectives. He greets the dark and silent figure, "Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any specter I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear you company and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?" It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them. "Lead on," said Scrooge, "lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, spirit." In company with this final ghost, Scrooge watches as scavengers sell off the belongings of a man who has recently died. "Very well, then," cried the woman, "that's enough. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose?" "No, indeed," said Mrs. Dilber, laughing. "If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, a wicked old screw," pursued the woman, "why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have had somebody to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of lying gasping out his last there, alone by himself." "It's the truest word that ever was spoke," said Mrs. Dilber. "It's a judgment on him." At last, the silent ghost of Christmas yet to come shows Scrooge the dead man's gravestone, which is, of course, his own. The specter's finger pointed from the grave to him and back again. "No, spirit, oh, no, no." The finger was still there. "Spirit," he cried, tight clutching at its robe, "hear me. I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been, but for this intercourse. Why show me this if I am past all hope? Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone.
The chalice is a symbol of our liberal faith. It is the warmth of compassion and the fire of justice, a lamp on the spiritual path. If you are joining us online and have a candle or a chalice nearby, please get ready to light it. I'd like to invite Cody Oreck to light this morning's chalice.
Good morning. My name is Cody Oreck. I'm a new member up here to light the chalice and share a few of my thoughts and experiences about this transition into 2024. In my long, good life, complicated, of course, as are all our lives, I have celebrated the new year in many different ways. As a Jew for a few decades, it was religious, with temple contemplations and apples and honey for a sweet new year on Rosh Hashanah in the autumn. But the Julian calendar New Year celebrations have often had a quality of, well, sort of drunken or at least tipsy despair, of a kind of wild sadness to be drowned in hilarity, covering regret and fear, I think, at least for me. One December 31st night, I sat in a tiny rowboat on the black water of the mighty Mississippi River, looking at my beloved city of New Orleans in all its colorful craziness, and just cried, sobbed really. Regret and grief for the state of things, and fear and helplessness in the face of what was to come, what I could do, what I couldn't do. That manic tension brought into sharp, painful focus at the edge of a turning calendar page. So weird. Living here and focusing more and more on nature and farming as a way to address climate change, I have learned about the fertility of edges, the edges of forests, the edges of reefs, the edges of fields. Life gathers itself at edges. INCAR and our great scientific institutions were built here where the plains meet the mountains. Edges, transitional places, have great power and fecundity. The perspective of an edge, a change, a transition, has become a place of more choice in my maturity. The liminal space of sunrise, when I choose my focus and try to form the day. The liminal space of sunset, when I choose gratitude, or I can choose gratitude, for all that the day brought and didn't bring. No matter what I'd planned, I can choose gratitude. I've come to see depression as another edge. Thank God, clinical depression, not clinical depression, but situational depression about our real human injustices to each other and our fellow beings and this little garden planet. I've come to see that as a different kind of transition. Depression is like a molting in a way, when the size of our souls has outgrown our previous worldview. That's what I choose to think anyway. So my oh-so-human way of bouncing between regret and this microphone for the past and fear of the future has settled into my choosing of this community, you all and you each, who choose at the edge of all possible choices, doggone it, connection and engagement, gratitude and love. Thank you for being who you are and deepening who we are together in this coming year and years.
We now invite all gathered in your various locations to join together in fellowship and community as we say aloud our congregation's covenant. We gather in fellowship to speak truth to each other, to reach out and touch one another, to care with each other, and to seek the truth divine. So be it. Laurel?
Good morning. Please, will you take a breath with me? And another. Our words for meditation are In-Betweenness by Michelle LaGrave. We, you and I, are in between right now. In between what was and what will be. In between who we were and who we will become. In between letting go and embracing. In between saying hello and saying goodbye. In betweenness, it's a thing. In betweenness is a time of fullness. A time of anticipation, a time of hope, a time of worry, a time of sadness. In-betweenness is a time of waiting, waiting for news, waiting for departure, waiting for arrival, waiting for death, waiting for life. In-betweenness is a time of transformation, a time of reflection, a time of action, a time of growing, a time of becoming. During this time of in-betweenness, of knowing and not knowing, let us enter into the silence. We will be in silence for 7 breaths. Amen, and blessed be.
When we say that our mission is, in part, to always love, it means that we actively seek connection and compassion across boundaries and borders. This week, we symbolize our connections with the elements of water, recognizing that ours is a dynamic community, ever-changing and supportive. As you come forward, collect petals to represent your joy and concerns, especially the fragile fears and hopes as we ponder as we move from one year to the next. Feel the petals' delicacy. Rub them gently together to release their sweet scent, and let them rest together with the thoughts of our whole community. So I invite you to come forward as you feel so moved.
So we sit here together on New Year's Eve, the threshold of a new year. The fact that 2023 ends today is a bit arbitrary, actually. The European calendar we follow goes all the way back to early Rome, when a king declared that a month named January would come first in the calendar. Other cultures have scheduled the transition to a new year in the spring, or fall, or summer. The Earth's track around the sun determines how long a year lasts, but the point where one lap begins and ends, we've completely made that up. Across time and across cultures, however, humans have made the arbitrary shift from one year to the next into a significant moment. In some cultures, it's a time to cleanse, to start fresh. In others, it's a time to reflect on the past and prepare for the future. For my part, I'm reading lots of articles about the best books and films of the past year, and I'm ignoring a lot of ads for the fitness equipment and online language courses that could transform me in 2024. Humans recognize and celebrate many other thresholds that we cross over throughout our lives. Anthropologists call these rituals rites of passage. They are ceremonies that mark a person's transition from one stage or state to another. Coming-of-age celebrations like bar and bat mitzvah or quinceañera, school graduations, military boot camps, weddings. Rites of passage all have common elements, and one of those is liminality. The word comes from the Latin for threshold. Liminality is the moment in a ritual when a person has symbolically shed their previous state or identity, but has not yet assumed their new identity. They are in between. They temporarily have no place in society. Rules and structures do not apply to them. This notion of a liminal state has proven powerful for understanding human experiences outside of ritual. Think of times in your life when you transitioned from one state to another. Student to professional, single to married, married to widowed, childless to parent, employed to retired. You had well-established rhythms in your life, structures you could count on. You knew the rules, knew what to expect, and then you didn't. The pattern of your days was about to change, but you did not yet know how. You were in between. My mother is living in liminality right now. My stepfather, her husband for 20 years, died recently. She had been his full-time caretaker for several years. Now, she says, she's aware of having a vast amount of free time and no idea what to do with it. It's frightening in a completely unfamiliar way. At every moment, she is caught between past and future. Wherever she is, whatever she is doing, it triggers memories of my stepfather. But she must make decisions and take action in a world that does not contain him. She is in between. That is liminality writ large. There's a micro version that we all experience. I learned about it, as it happens, during a lay-led service at my UU church in St. Louis. A dance teacher from the congregation invited us to consider the motions of our bodies. He pointed out that, for those who can walk, every step contains a fall. You push off with your rear foot, and your body sways forward. When you swing that foot in front of you and plant it on the ground, what's happening is that you're catching yourself from falling. There's a tiny liminal moment between separating from and then rejoining the ground. But for many of us, it doesn't feel that way. I'm quite certain about what will happen with every step. I don't pay any attention to each potential fall until I trip. When the unexpected happens, when my foot isn't there to catch me, suddenly all of my attention turns to falling. You know how time slows down in a moment like this? You seem to have time for a lot of thoughts, and you notice tiny details. There isn't scientific agreement about why this happens, but one explanation is that our brain process speeds up when in danger in order to take in and assess as much data as possible to make ourselves safe. When the danger is over, when we no longer need a solution for it, our brains slow down again, and time seems to return to its normal pace. This is another example of a liminal experience. So far, liminality sounds like a horrible state to be in. The situations I've described involve loss, disorientation, uncertainty. But there are other characteristics of it, notably the opportunity for discovery. When rules fall away, so do limits. Imaginative play occupies a liminal space. I'm a pirate, you're a dragon, and we make it up as we go. Traveling in a foreign country can be liminal in both positive and negative ways. People who go on retreats for spiritual or health reasons are creating liminal experiences for themselves. Certain spaces can be liminal. Porches, hallways, elevators, airports. I love airports for just this reason. Once I get to the gate, I have departed from where I was, but I won't arrive where I'm going for a while. It feels as if I'm not bound by the obligations of either place. When I flew back to Colorado after my stepfather's death, I found myself wanting to linger in the airport. To exit was to return to the world in which he had died. Here's a vast liminal experience we all had recently, the COVID pandemic. We were in between. We didn't know what would happen next, and it was neither universally devastating nor universally constructive. It was both. It caused great suffering, and it offered new tools and perspectives. It revealed our complacencies. Ebenezer Scrooge spent some time in liminality, a space of ghosts and time travel. And here's something I noticed while gathering pieces of that story. Scrooge's transformation happened with his own participation. "Ghost of the future," he said, "I fear you more than any specter I have seen, but as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear you company and do it with a thankful heart." What if we do more than endure liminality? What if we recognize that uncertainty can be both frightening and fertile? Think about how falling focuses the tremendous force of our brain's abilities in a single direction. What if we applied that same focus in other liminal moments, observing closely, using all our senses, searching for alternatives, reaching with our imaginations into a different future than we were expecting? I can see my mother's resilient effort to do just this. You know where else we find ourselves in liminality? In worship. When we talked with Reverend David about our theme today, he told us that worship services are actually designed like rites of passage. There's a sequence in the order of service that leads us away from our everyday lives, deposits us in liminality, and then leads us back again, transformed. Thank you for joining us in the liminal.
you. Like many of you, I'll bet, I've experienced several periods when I was in a state of betwixt and between. Today I'm going to reflect on a couple of them. After college when I was in my 20s, and after getting divorced when I was in my 30s. Do any of you remember a time when you were in between, not sure what the future held? By reflecting on these periods of my life, I hope to illuminate some of the characteristics of the in-between. Specifically, my experience reveals some of the ways that we can combine elements of our pasts with possibilities in our present to build new directions in the future. I graduated from college in 1988 without a career plan. My final semester came and it seemed like all my friends were going on interviews or already had post-graduation plans. I couldn't figure out how to build on my comparative literature degree and my interests. A highlight of college for me was when I'd spent a semester abroad at a unique exchange program my university had in what was then East Germany. My undergraduate thesis advisor led that program, and luckily he was willing to sponsor me doing a project there for the 1988-89 academic year. In the following summer of 1989, I returned from 9 months behind the Iron Curtain, speaking another language that whole time and living in a very different cultural historical context. In so many ways, I was in a liminal state, betwixt and between my past and my future. I no longer felt at home in my home country of the United States. By stepping out and living somewhere else for an extended period, what was once familiar seemed strange. Grocery stores, football games, so much of everyday life. More importantly, I didn't like some of what I was seeing more clearly than I ever had. The lack of gender and racial equity, no decent recycling system, a completely inadequate social safety net in terms of poverty, childcare, homelessness, and hunger. The US liked to characterize itself as so superior to the authoritarian regimes of the Eastern Bloc we opposed during the Cold War, and we certainly had greater freedoms and more democracy. But my idealism was shaken, and I had a deep sense of alienation. I was no longer sure that our American way of life was good and that our society could move toward a more humane environment where all people could thrive. Speaking of thriving, I had just moved back to a capitalist society and I didn't have a job or a career path. So what was I going to do? Well, I took a bit of a leap of faith. I decided to move in with a former college roommate in Boston while I looked for a job. I experienced several long months of feeling unmoored, readjusting to American life, and exploring future possibilities. One of the things I found was that it helped to be rooted in some steady, reliable things while reaching for a future that built on my past in a new way. My friends were my rock when I felt most unsure, and I took comfort in their believing in me. I had a vague sense that I wanted to do something in education. After several interviews that led nowhere, and as I was running out of savings to pay the rent, I eventually landed a job with a software company that produced educational and business applications. That happened because I had experience after my first stint studying abroad working with a German professor using an educational technology called HyperCard. Very 80s thing. And the software company had a business partner in Germany they were contracting with. So my fluency in German shockingly became practical. That job was the launching pad for my professional career, moving from educational technology to educational research and development. Flash forward 11 years to 2000, and I'd completed a doctorate in education, gotten married, adopted my first dog, and landed a tenure-track job at a university in the town where my wife's family lived. I thought I could see my future clearly in front of me, but my then wife announced she was leaving our marriage, so once again I was betwixt and between. Those were dark days when I struggled to not despair. I thought about moving to a whole new city and a new job, but found that did not appeal to me. Instead, I turned once again to what was steady, that I could lean on to help me imagine a new future. I stayed in St. Louis, relied on my family and close friends to hold me, and built my academic career. There was a sense in which this period allowed me to reach back and correct what in retrospect I saw as a wrong turn from my liminal period in my 20s. I had continued to struggle with having grown apart from my family of origin. I had felt that they couldn't understand or relate to my highfalutin education and my time living abroad in another country. After my divorce, though, I turned to my siblings and found that they had always been there and always would be for me. They provided me the foundation of love that I rely on to this day. I also began exploring a return to a religious community. I had grown up Catholic, but had stepped away from it after college, unsatisfied with much of the doctrine that I couldn't reconcile with my personal beliefs. I explored liberal Catholicism, where several of my close friends had found a religious home. But then one day, my wife-to-be, Cait McQuade, introduced me to Unitarian Universalism. Interestingly, I felt at home with UU because it was both old and new. It built on some of what was meaningful to me about my prior religious experiences, an appreciation of the power of ritual and the importance of human community with shared values and purpose. And it also had some qualities that resonated with values that I'd cultivated and which I'd found lacking in my previous religious communities. These included a more grassroots organization with congregational governance, as well as an open-endedness and sense of raising questions rather than already having found answers. So these liminal periods allowed me to combine building blocks from various parts of my life in a new way into what we in my field sometimes refer to as new hybrid directions. The direction I moved coming out of each liminal period was not entirely predictable, but it incorporated the past in a new way. Looking back over these liminal periods, I'm reminded of the Celtic tree of life symbol. I'm sure you've seen it, and I wear one around my neck. In the center is a trunk, which I think of as my present-day self. Below is a rich network of roots representing my past, and above is a crown of branches and leaves, signifying reaching for the light of new knowledge and experience. The deep roots reach into my past to connect me with my kin and bring in water, minerals, and other essential nutrients. The leaves on the branches convert the light's energy and carbon dioxide from the air into sugar. Together, these processes allow me to grow the cambium tissue in my trunk, build a new ring each year, and branch out in new directions. As we go forth into the new year, may we all keep in mind how precious the in-between is and draw sustenance from our deep roots and from the light of the world.
It's now time for our offering. This month, our offering goes to support the operations of UUCB's programs and facilities. For the other 11 months of the year, we share our plate with other organizations in the community, but this month, we keep it in-house. So I invite you to give as generously as you are able For those online, you can use the QR code or find a link in the video description. For those gathered in person, you could also use the QR code, and I see somebody doing that. How about that? Or make a donation as the ushers now pass the baskets. May our gifts be used to enact justice, bringing peace and love to our dear Boulder community. So as we go out to face this season of endings and beginnings, try to enjoy some of this in-between time during this next week. Be curious. Question the old stories you tell yourself. Explore your edges. They can be good teachers. Spend some time within the I don't know if you can. And look for life's questions. The answers will come. Don't hurry them. And we'll pass over this New Year threshold together in the ritual next Sunday with Reverend David in the Burning Bell service. To close, I offer this poem by the Reverend Martha Postlethwaite called Clearing. Do not try to save the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is yours alone to sing falls into your open, cupped hands, and you recognize it and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to this world, so worthy of rescue. So if we'll rise as we're willing and able and join our closing hymn.